It's myself, Jeremy Smith, and Hugo. We both work for the office of the CTO. So first get through the disclaimer. Okay, so the session today is on building smart apps with the TIBCO Cloud Starters Toolkit. And if you followed the previous session, you would have seen Process Discover, which started also with the Cloud Starters Toolkit. So what we're going to do is give you a tour of this open framework, kind of tell you what you can do with it, how it works. We'll show you what the toolkit offers, and then Hugo's going to demonstrate how you can use that toolkit to create business applications on TIBCO Cloud. But before we get going, let's start with a quick overview of exactly what the TIBCO Cloud Toolkit is and what TIBCO Cloud is. So TIBCO Cloud is our cloud native environment, and we offer our core kind of TIBCO product capabilities, only offering them as services that are consumable by our customers' business applications. So you can kind of use the key capabilities such as integration, API, analytics, low code that you expect from TIBCO, but you can use them as a cloud hosted service and you can concentrate on the business logic of your applications. So how do we get started quickly creating these applications on TIBCO Cloud? Well, when you're on the TIBCO Cloud homepage, there's a little button on the right-hand side that says Solutions. And if you follow that link, you will be able to get all the information about where you can get the toolkit and also with some links to some sample applications. So the TIBCO Cloud Starters Toolkit is extending TIBCO Cloud to let you build these smart apps. It's built and maintained by our team in TIBCO Labs, and we regularly update it as the capabilities of TIBCO Cloud move forward. So what exactly is actually in this toolkit? So the aim of the toolkit is to get you started fast creating the applications, and therefore it contains lots of templates, samples and libraries. We effectively generate UI code, and we also provide CI/CD support to create your applications, all whilst leveraging TIBCO Cloud for kind of the server-side capabilities, and that's really to ensure that you get the kind of enterprise-grade monitoring management updates that you would require and expect for enterprise business apps. So when you've created a solution, you can also upload that directly to TIBCO Cloud, and the application itself will be hosted for you, so you don't need to host that. So the slide that you can see now are some of the capabilities that are provided by the toolkit. As you can see, the capabilities very much focused on a developer persona, wanting to get started quickly creating applications on TIBCO Cloud. So with that in mind, you can see that we provide these templated applications that are actually hosted as open source on GitHub. We have a series of libraries to make interacting with our products easier and simpler, and they're all distributed via NPM. And we also have building blocks in the form of components such as stencil components and Angular components that you can use to create applications. We also use Angular schematics to help you create parts of applications to get you moving forward quickly. And of course, there's a whole series of documentation sites and all the CI/CD capabilities that we've talked about to help do kind of integration builds and so forth with Jenkins. Okay, so before we go on to a demo of what you can do with the toolkit, let's just have a look at some examples of applications that we've been creating with the Cloud Starters Toolkit. So you can see 4 examples on the screen. Let's start with City Harvest. So this was an actionable analytics kind of application that was created for City Harvest London. City Harvest are a charity that provide a managed food distribution to get food to people in need. At the start of the COVID pandemic, we worked with City Harvest basically to help them address an urgent issue. They had suddenly a huge amount of food to distribute, and lots of people that needed that food due to all the restaurants, etc., and hotels closing. And they really needed a way to kind of manage the distribution So we created this application that used Spotfire Analytics on TIBCO Cloud and TIBCO Cloud Live Apps to help them kind of really manage that distribution in real time. Also related to COVID was the GatherSmart application, which you can see on the screen on the top right. So GatherSmart's a service which we offer to assist customers getting back to the office. A little more on that shortly. The example on the bottom left on student engagement is an application that also uses analytics, but combines this with complex event processing to help manage customer churn. Okay, so let's look a little more in detail at GatherSmart. The GatherSmart solution is effectively two key business applications that are built using the toolkit on TIBCO Cloud. There's a mobile application and there's a control center application. The mobile application is a simple app that an employee will install on their phone, and they use it when they want to go to an office. To get to the office, they answer some questions, they obtain a passport, and that gives them access. On the other side, the control center is used by the employer's HR department to ensure that the personnel have safe access. They use it to manage who gets which passports. They can set up business rules for what you need to do to come to the office, and they can manage that whole passport application. They can also use it to send out alerts and manage their resources access. So how does it work? GatherSmart works by kind of combining the cloud services of low code with analytics and business rules. So HR configures the system initially, and they set up a survey of questions, which are effectively business rules, which govern who can access the office. Employers are then onboarded automatically or by a HR rep. So they get an invitation through their email and they can click on it to install the application. And then when they go to the office, they basically answer the questions on the application. And assuming that they meet all the requirements that have been set for that office, then they get a passport. The passport has a QR code, and they scan that at the office, and they can get then access to the office that they need to go to. Okay, on the other side, the control center app is really providing this embedded smart analytics capability for the HR personnel to manage who's in the office. So HR can use this tool to kind of monitor which employees they have in which offices, and then they can actually take action directly from that application using the low code capabilities to kind of manage the office safely. So if they need to suddenly see a lot of people within an area, then they can, you know, send a message to stay home, or request a survey again, or kind of change the rules according to who can access that office. The other aspect of this part of the control center is that the kind of leadership teams can actually bring in additional data to help manage that office access. So, for example, they can bring in data about COVID cases within the area or recent surges, and then they can use that maybe to cancel the passports and require everybody, for example, to work from home on that day. The HR team uses the kind of case management capabilities that comes with TIBCO Cloud Live Apps to really manage the employee access. So they can go in through the tool and actually look at all the employee details, understand where they are, who's accessed which offices, and then kind of send them messages if they need to basically ask them to recomplete their passports, etc. On the business rules aspect, they use the tool to actually configure the Cloud Events business rules to set up the survey. So you can see there's a graphical tool where you can set up questions about, you know, what your current symptoms are or how you're feeling today. And you can go through, effectively build like a wizard of questions and answers, which will determine whether an employee can go to the office. That's all managed within the tool by the HR team. And what they set up here on this kind of rules management screen will then determine what the survey looks like for each employer. Okay, so that's some good examples of the Cloud Starters Toolkit in use in real applications. But if you want to kind of get started, before we go to the demo, there's a few links on this page that gives you an idea of where you can go to really get some more information about the Cloud Starters Toolkit. So a good place to start is the TIBCO Labs page, or if you want to jump straight into the actual code and start using the toolkit, there's a GitHub link which will take you to the toolkit. And of course, there's also the community where you can use to communicate with us and get help. So with that in mind, let's hand over to Hugo, and Hugo can show us the Cloud Starters Toolkit at work, creating a new smart app.
Yeah, so thanks, Jeremy, for showing us a number of examples of of the smart apps that you can build with the Cloud Starter Toolkit. I would like to show you basically in, let's say, 10 minutes, how you can create a Cloud Starter from scratch. So we start at the homepage where we can find information on the Cloud Starters, where we can find a number of examples. And then we'll basically start with a complete empty environment or an empty directory. I'm using Visual Studio Code here, but you can also do this from the command line or in a terminal if you want, or use any IDE of your choice. And then we use NPM to basically install this CLI tool. Then we can check what the version is. So basically see if it's running or if it's working with the -v command. And then basically we can start typing TCLI in an empty folder. And then we get an option to basically create a new Cloud Starter. Then we get a number of questions. So basically, what is the name of your Cloud Starter? Then we have a number of templates, and all of these templates are also available as open source projects on GitHub. And if we choose one of those templates, it'll basically be downloaded from the cloud. And while that is running, or while that is setting up, I want to talk a little bit about TIBCO Live Apps. In Live Apps, we've created this application called My Orders. And Live Apps has a number of creators, or in this case, a creator to create orders, and it has actions. And in Live Apps, you have this state diagram where you see all the different states of where an order goes through. And you can use these actions to go from one state to another state. So you see that the order goes through its entire life cycle. Then in Live Apps, you can also define a number of data fields. So let's say the quantity, which is a number or some strings, but you can also define your own data type like an address. To learn more about Live Apps, I would recommend you to go to the Live Apps page and sign up for a free trial and play with it. Now from Live Apps, we also have the case manager, and in the case manager, we can create a new order. So for example, we provide the details that we just defined. So for example, a customer name, a street, a quantity, and the product that we want. For example, some fruits that we want to order. And the idea of this demo is really to create like a custom UI into this Live Apps application, and then to add a Spotfire report onto this. So we've now seen Live Apps. Here we can see the order existing within Live Apps on the TIBCO Cloud. So now if we go back to the environment, and the Cloud Starter in the meanwhile has been created, what we can basically do is give a command to start the Cloud Starter. So all of the sources are now on our local disk, and now we can start up the Cloud Starter locally. So it will run on our local host. And in the meanwhile, let's have a look at the different sources that are created. So this is basically an Angular application. And inside of the Angular application, you'll find this package.json file that contains all the links to the Angular libraries and all the other dependencies. But it also contains some Cloud Starter libraries as well. So if you go to the public NPM page, where all of those sources are distributed, and you look for TIBCO, you'll basically find these libraries. And these libraries really form the link from your Cloud Starter to the TIBCO Cloud. So here we have the source folder, and inside of the source folder, you will find this home component. So the way that Angular works is you can really extend these HTML tags with your own tags, basically. So in this case, we have a home cockpit that comes from that NPM package. Now, while the Cloud Starter is starting up, and I see that it started up now, we basically get a link and we can click that link. And now we have our own, let's say, custom homepage or custom Cloud Starter running on our local machine. And you'll see that you go to a splash page first, and then we can click on Get Started. And then you see, let's say, the initial template that we used. Now, from here, we can go into Live Apps, and we basically can select that My Order application. So that means that this specific application is now specific for my orders. So you will see the orders are also appearing in this UI. So the order that we just created, you can see it here. You can see all the data that we entered. And you can actually also start working with the order. So you can submit the work item, and you basically see that the order goes through the next state, basically. Now, in the right top, you have this configuration area. And what you can do here is you can basically make changes to the configuration of the app. So what we can do, for example, if we can change the title of the application. So we can make it My Order application. So now if we refresh the page, you'll see on the top that it has a new title, My Order application. Now, all of this information is stored in the TIBCO Cloud under a service called the Shared State service. And from here, in your development environment, we can actually edit that shared state. So we go into the OSS demo folder, we type TCLI, and then we have a command called watch shared state. Now, what will that do? It will basically download that shared state to your local machine under a shared state folder. And there you have all the JSON configurations of this shared state. And this watcher is kind of watching for file changes. So now you see the title of the Cloud Starter. And as soon as we make a change to this file and we save it, you see that the watcher basically updates this into the TIBCO Cloud. So now if we refresh this page, you'll basically see that the title of the page is changed into My Awesome Order application. But not only that, we can also change it from here. So let's say we make it My New Order application, and we change the shared state, let's say from your UI. Then you can go back into the watcher, and you can basically say, okay, I want to reload what has happened there. So I go back to the IDE, I press reload, and then I basically see my new order application or my new application title showing up. All right, so in the next part of the demo, what we basically want to do is we want to make some changes in the code. And then we don't only want to change the configuration, but we basically also want to change the actual HTML code. By the way, we are following a tutorial that is also available online, so you can follow all these steps step by step yourself as well. So again, we have this area where you can change the configuration. So we could click there, for example, and we could also change the application title. So we could, for example, make this orders. We save that, and then we close the application, and then we see the order title. So this is all the configuration that you can change into shared state. But here we have this a specific home component, which is basically HTML. And you can also start changing the HTML code as well. So let's say if we want to add a picture to the left, we can just insert a piece of HTML for an image. And we don't have to recompile the application. Angular automatically picks up changes, and then it basically reloads the page on your development environment. So now we basically added this picture to the left side of the page. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we basically want to add a, let's say, analytical report to this page. So a Spotfire report. And what we can do, and we will just stop the runtime for a second in order to do that. We can basically get the location of that Spotfire report. And by the way, you see every time that you run a CLI command, you get a replay command, which allows you to run it completely verbose with the recorder. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. But here we have a command that we just pass in some answers with the -a option. And then basically we can run it and you'll see that those answers are being set. And this command just looks for a Spotfire path. And it will basically paste that into the TIBCO Cloud property file. So if we open the TIBCO Cloud property file and we look all the way at the bottom, we basically get the location of this specific Spotfire path of the Spotfire that we want to add into. So in the next step, we want to use the schematics that Jeremy was talking about earlier as well. Oh no, sorry, we just want to have a look at what Spotfire reports are available. So here we get a list of all the Spotfire reports that are in our environment. And then at the top, we basically see that we have this sales and marketing Spotfire report. And then we also have this replay command that we can use. So here we had to answer a question. And now we can basically paste in this command and then run it, and then automatically it will display the list of the Spotfire reports as well. And we need this information for later in order to insert that Spotfire report. So now in this step, we will run the command to basically say we want to add a schematic. So we run the schematics add command. Then we can choose from a number of defined Angular schematics. In this case, we want to create an analytical cockpit. So we just provided a name, let's say my dashboard. And what a schematic really does, it basically asks you a number of questions. And based on your answers, it will start updating and changing your code. So it will generate all the HTML, it will generate all the CSS and the TypeScript or the JavaScript needed. So if we have a look at our code there on the left, we basically see that we've generated a new component called My Dashboard. And then inside of our home root, we can now basically change this Live Apps cockpit that we had earlier. And we can basically change that into My Dashboard. So the new generated component. So Angular works in the way that it extends these HTML tags. So with these schematics, you can basically generate your own HTML tags that you want to use. Then we start up the application again. And then if we go back to the browser and we look at what our application looks like now, then what we'll basically see is that we have the same as before, but now we have an additional tab called Analytics. And inside here, we have our analytical Spotfire report. So we've basically added this into our application. All right, so in the next demo, what we want to do is we want to change this report that we've added into to the sales and marketing report that we had on that we just found. So this specific report, and then we want to deploy the entire result to the TIBCO Cloud. So we take this part, the Spotfire pad, we add this sales and marketing report that we had, and we're going to basically do the same trick as we've done before. So here is the report that we want to change. We have this specific tab. We want to change that into the new report. We're going to run the watch shared state again. And before the watches start, we export the current state of the shared state. And then you will find that there is a Spotfire config area inside of the shared state. So here we have the Spotfire server and we have the analysis path. So we want to use, instead of the demo server, we want to use the Spotfire of the TIBCO Cloud. and we want to take that Spotfire path that we've extracted and change that here. So we paste that in, and in the bottom, you see that the shared state gets updated directly. And now if we refresh our page, we'll basically see that we've changed this analytical report, and it's now our sales and marketing report. Now, obviously, we could also connect this to the live apps database in order to show the information on the orders. And then last but not least, what we want to do is we basically want to deploy this application to the actual TIBCO Cloud. And for that, we can just run the build and deploy command. And then you will see it's uploading a file to the TIBCO Cloud. Then we get a link, and we can open that link in our browser. And now you will see that we have the application that we had before. So my new order application, basically running on the TIBCO Cloud. So it's running on cloud.tibco.com. And then we can click Get Started to see that it's the real application with the picture on the left and the analytical report in the middle. And then here you can basically see the entire application. So that kind of concludes the demo, where we basically build an app from scratch. Made some changes in the configuration, then made some changes to the HTML code, then generated some additional components with the Angular schematics, and eventually deployed that entire result to the TIBCO Cloud. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And I was wondering if there are any questions.
Excellent, Hugo, Jeremy. That was really cool. Very, very interesting.